Good evening, this is Viewpoint. I'm Zakka Jocob. A delegation of Kashmiri pundits has spoken for the very first time at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva. They have completely exposed how Pakistan, with the help of both local as well as foreign terrorists, has carried out mass killings. It led to the exodus of Kashmiri pundits back in the 1990s. But the fact is that even today, pundits are facing a security threat in Kashmir, as was evidenced in the killing of Rahul Bhatt, Rajni Bala and Makhanlal Bindru. The question is, the UNHRC itself may be a biased institution, certainly under its previous head, Michelle Bachelet, the former Chilean president. There were repeated reports that the UNHRC had put out questioning what is happening on the ground in Kashmir. The Indian government, both through the MEA as well as its representatives at the UNHRC, have given a firm response to that. The question right now is this. Now that the pundits have spoken at the United Nations Human Rights Council, what face will Pakistan now have to say that what's happening in Kashmir is indigenously developed, it's a local problem, and that it has nothing to do with the export of terror from across the border? All right, before we go across to our panelists, I just want to bring you up to speed with some figures as to how Naya Kashmir, particularly after 5th of August 2019, has been rattling Pakistan. The terror export track record of Pakistan so far. Just in the last 1 year, up until May 2022, which is when we have data available, there were 62 terror attacks in Jammu and Kashmir until May 2022. This was submitted by the Union Home Ministry in a written reply in Parliament. 80 Pakistan-backed terrorists were killed just in the calendar year of 2022. This is until May. 128 security personnel were killed between August 2019 and June 2022. That's the period of course, right after the scrapping, the abrogation of Article 370. And in that same period, 118 civilians were also killed in attacks between August 2019 and June of 2022. So the question that's being asked is, for the very first time, Kashmiri pundits, who are a victimized group who were chased out of the Kashmir Valley, and also who even today are facing threats from terrorists both within Kashmir and the exported variety that are exported from across the border, they have made their case before the highest human rights body of the United Nations. Let me go across to Lalit Ambardar. He's a Kashmiri activist. Sushant Sareen, senior fellow at the ORF. Arti Tuku is founder and editor-in-chief of The New Indian. She'll be joining us in a moment. And Ambassador Anil Trigunyat, former diplomat, also on the broadcast. Sushant, let me start with you first. The UNHRC itself is seemingly a biased organization, no doubt about it. In fact, under its previous chief, Michelle Bachelet, there were repeated reports that were brought out under her stewardship questioning what is happening in Kashmir. India, in fact, had responded to that, saying that the reports that have come out are fallacious, tendentious, and motivated, and that individual countries are trying to influence, and individuals are trying to influence the role of the UNHRC. Will the fact that Kashmiri pundits today spoke and exposed Pakistan and its nefarious activities have any ramifications beyond the four walls of the UNHRC?
Zakka, I don't know what ramifications it will have if the conscience of the world was not shaken when over 500,000 Kashmiri pundits were forcibly evicted from the Kashmir Valley by the terrorists out there. Then I don't know whether, the testimonies of the victims in the halls of Geneva will actually shake the conscience of these countries. Number two, please look at some of the countries which are members of the UNHRC. China, right? You have countries like Iran. You have countries like Pakistan. I could name an entire rogues gallery of countries which are members of the UNHRC. So to expect that these guys are going to actually, their conscience is going to be shaken, and that UNHRC is actually in the business of protecting human rights of people in various parts of the world. Well, that's a figment of imagination of whoever thinks that.
Okay.
Number three, I think what is important, even though I don't think much is going to come out of it, but I think it is very important that until now, for almost 40 years, there has been this kind of toing and froing at the Geneva UNHRC. But I think this is among the first time, not only in Geneva, but even in the UN, in New York, you had a victim of terrorism, Mr. Karambir Kang,
Correct.
who lost his entire family in the 26/11 attacks. He spoke out there. And it is very good that, we show to the world the victims of terrorism rather than, these human rights entrepreneurs who are going out there and, trying to get funding and doing all kinds of shady activity. I think it is very important to at least put on record the testimony of the victims of terror. So to that extent, I think this is a very useful exercise and it needs to be done much more. Not just last point, Zakka, not just of the Kashmiri pundits. And I think we need to be extremely careful on this. Because in Kashmir, it is not just the Kashmiri Pandits. They've, of course, faced the brunt of it. But the Kashmiri Muslims have also, their human rights have also been violated by these terrorists. They have also been butchered in Kashmir. And I think it is very important that their stories also be put out there.
All right. When the last report came out about the situation in Kashmir, this was in July of 2019, just a few months after, just ahead of the scrapping of Article 370. This is how the MEA had responded to it. This undermines the credibility of a UN institution. The MEA called the report overtly prejudiced. It seeks to build a false narrative. The report violates India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. In fact, the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. Pakistan is an illegal and forcible occupation of a part of the Indian state through aggression. This is the MEA's official response. Let me ask Ambassador Trigunyat, as a former diplomat, various actors, various individuals use the platforms of the UNHRC for their own, limited and vested political interests, including organizations like the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries. What relevance will today's statements by the Kashmiri Pandit community at the UNHRC exposing Pakistan's double speak, what relevance will it have when members of the UNHRC include those whose human rights record are dubious, whether it's China, Iran, Pakistan, etc.?
Well, Zakka, that is absolutely a truth that as far as certain states are concerned. And the fact that a country like Pakistan, whose foreign policy is essentially based on cross-border terrorism against India, especially in Kashmir, and that has been going on for 4 decades at least. Every time, unfortunately, the reports that have been coming out have been for some kind of a violations of human rights by the forces. But nobody ever spoke of the kind of carnage, the kind of dislocation that happened, and irrespective of the community. Of course, the Pandits, Kashmiri Pandits, have a lot to talk about and a lot of problems that they have suffered over the years, but that nobody cares about it. There are reports, and the whole world knows that Pakistan is a haven of terrorism, haven of terrorists. As late as just last 2 weeks ago, when China put its technical hold against another big terrorist. So they have been. So I think there is concern, but at the same time, as Shan said, it is important for these people to go and speak at least that there is the other side of the story. Terrorism itself is a violation of the human rights and is not justifiable under any means. And that's what India says, that the reports that have come out are essentially made and targeted the Indian state rather than the root cause of the problem from the other side of the border.
Let me ask Aarti Tikku, it was not just the fact that there were 300,000 Kashmiri Pandits who were forced to flee back in the 1990s, but there are 70,000 of them who are officially registered as migrants in various parts of India who are hoping to go back to their homeland. But what about the situation today? Over the last 1 year or so, we have seen whether it is a Rahul Bhatt or a Rajni Bala or a Makhanlal Bindru, how safe are the Kashmiri Pandits, even the ones who are going back to the valley over the last year, year and a half or so? because there is a feeling in the Pandit community, and I'll ask Lalit also this in a moment, that they are somehow, quote-unquote, sitting ducks for these terrorists who are still operational, both in Kashmir and from across the border.
Well, Zakka, to begin with, we must acknowledge the fact that the situation that Kashmir saw in 89-90, we have come far from that situation in the last 32 years. I do not think that it's the same kind of chaotic, unstable Kashmir that we experienced 32 years ago. Having said that, I do also acknowledge that a certain amount of conflict entrepreneurship, a certain section which indulged in the conflict entrepreneurship in the last 32 years, it is still active there. It has not been dismantled. The government has done tremendous work in the last few years, starting with the banning of Jamaat-e-Islami Kashmir and banning of Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, also cracking down on the terror funding in the last few years. And then, of course, the landmark decision that the government took in 2019 on August 5th by revoking Article 370 and nullifying 35A as well. I think all these measures have made a lot of difference. But at the same time, if you do not clean the entire slate on which Islamic terrorism was founded, or in fact was allowed to function for the last 3 decades, unless and until you dismantle that completely, clean it up, we will see targeted killings of Kashmiri Hindus in Kashmir. That's what we've been seeing in the last few years.
Okay.
But I am not pessimistic. I do not think that the road for the return of Kashmiri Pundits and rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pundits in Kashmir has ended. I think that road is open, and it will open up more as the government pursues and is persistent in its efforts to dismantle the terror network, which is not only prevalent in Kashmir. Some of the people who were beneficiaries of that conflict entrepreneurship and this Islamic radicalism and terrorism are also sitting in Delhi and other parts of the country.
Okay, I want to ask Lalit Ambardar that, what Aarti is saying is absolutely right. It's not going to be easy to dismantle this conflict entrepreneurship and people who have thrived from it over the last 30 odd years in the Kashmir Valley. Yes, Article 370 is gone. That is a significant step, no doubt about it. The data shows that the number of terrorist attacks has come down, both in terms of cross-border terror as well as indigenous terror that is happening in Kashmir. But the fact is, Lalit, and I want to ask you this as a Kashmiri Pandit, today, do you feel safe to go back to Kashmir? Does your family feel safe to go back to Kashmir? And please bring us up to speed with what Sushant and Ambassador Trigoni had said that, well, yes, the UNHRC may be a biased organization, but at least you've got the Pandit view out there from the highest human rights body in the world.
Zakka, let me first convey to you, it's not for the first time Kashmiri Pandits have spoken at UNHRC Geneva. In 1992-93, our people have been part of the delegation on behalf of Indian group, who have been there. Panun Kashmir's leader, Dr. Ajay Surangu, made a special presentation there in Geneva. The question is, yes, at that time, there was a risk of putting some sanction against India. And let me also remind that Iran came to rescue. Narasimha Rao was the prime minister, and Mr. Dinesh Singh was our foreign minister. He was sick, very seriously ill in All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He was taken out right at night on a stretcher, put onto a air ambulance, taken to Iran. There he spoke to his counterparts and returned back with an optimistic response from the Iranians, and the situation was saved in Geneva. But the point is, do we realize, do we acknowledge what we have on hand in Kashmir? Look, Kashmir Jihad is a military problem. We have not been formally saying that what India has on hand in Kashmir is Kashmir Jihad. It's a pan-Islamism inspired terror-infested, expansionist Kashmir Jihad. And then they have been trying all these 32 years to expand, to spread their tentacles in Jammu region. But Jammu people, Dogras, have resisted. They were able to resist it because of the demographic situation there. But in Kashmir, Kashmiri Hindus suffered genocide. And yes, I repeat, on your channel, I said it earlier, even the present government has not yet acknowledged what Kashmiri Hindus have suffered was genocide. And you know what the tools of genocide were? Rape, murder, and mass murder. And yet, there is no acknowledgement on behalf of the government. How do you expect the world to respond? You can't use Kashmiri pundits to save a situation in Geneva, in front of the international community, while as on your own, your BJPs, the current establishment's representative on your channel, told me, Lalit, you must move on. If this is how you're going to treat the victims of genocide internally, on behalf of the government of India, then you can imagine what would be the response globally. Okay. I don't think it does make any difference. Now we are in a better situation. We are not facing any sanctions. I think it's a ritualistic. Unless and until government of India does it on its own, realizes that they have to acknowledge what Kashmiri Hindus have suffered. Can you imagine? Not one rapist, murderer, or mass murderer has ever been charged in Kashmir, ever been tried. This Bita Karate, Farooq Ahmed Dar's trial was announced with pomp and show. Here is a self-acclaimed butcher of Kashmiri Hindus. Yeah. He's being tried in Kashmir. Of course, not for Kashmiri Hindus genocide, for terror fund. Even then, yes, there was one case that was against him. The trial began. One hearing was held. Subsequently, two subsequent hearings were abandoned, were aborted because the local administration failed to provide security to the counsel of the victim's family. He had to return back from the Srinagar airport, and since then it's quiet. So what we have to understand, see, genocide has an aspect to it, very important aspect to it. If you do not acknowledge it, if you do not check it, it has a tendency to replicate itself. All right, let me go back to Sushant Sareen as well. You know, one of the problems, Sushant, is that there is this collection of countries, the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries, in September 2021. They had raised the Kashmir issue at the United Nations Human Rights Council. India had exercised its right of response and said that basically the 57-nation bloc is helplessly allowing itself to be held hostage by Islamabad. In fact, India mounted a blistering attack on Pakistan, saying that a globally recognized country that openly supports, trains, finances, and arms terrorists, including UN-prescribed ones as a matter of state policy, should not be giving lessons to India. India does not need lessons from a failed state. The question simply is this, that when Pakistan knocks on the doors of the UNHRC, it has countries like Saudi Arabia, the GCC countries, or Iran, Turkey, etc. coming to its aid. When India presents how it is a victim of terror, not even our most steadfast allies back us.
But Zakka, I think you need to put a bit of nuance in it. I don't think the Saudis, at least in the last 8-10 years, maybe in the early 90s, they were backing these guys quite a lot. But I don't think the UAE or the Saudis or most of the Islamic bloc, apart from, somebody like a Turkey or maybe a Malaysia, one of these kind of guys. But most of the Islamic bloc, they kind of balance between India and Pakistan in the sense that they will say, okay, fine, OIC is a useless organization anyways, nobody bothers about it. So let some resolution come in, how does it matter? Otherwise, we have excellent relations with India. So they try and balance it like that. The other side of it is, Zakka, we have never really tried to take a case against Pakistan and pin it down. Whether it's on Balochistan, whether it's on terrorism in Kashmir, whether it's on 50 other things, egregious violations of human rights, which the Pakistanis do on a daily basis. The minorities, the treatment of minorities in Pakistan, we issue pro forma statements, but nothing beyond that. And, about those UN reports on Kashmir, which you're talking about. Number one, before this scandalous woman from Chile, who was a complete disaster because she never opened her mouth against the Chinese even once, despite the fact that the UN had come out with reports on the Chinese treatment of Muslims. But she was extremely biased against India. I don't know for what reason, but even her predecessor, this Jordanian clown prince or some kind of a prince from there, that report, what it was based on newspaper clippings. And where were those newspapers coming from? Most of those clippings were from Pakistan or from the separatist press inside Kashmir. So on that basis, these guys built up this report and they presented it. They mentioned it in the report that, we had to do this, but we had to come out with this report. Now, that is the kind of way the UNHRC has been functioning. And I think what India needs to do is launch a massive counter-offensive to pin down countries like Pakistan on their human rights record.
No, I think your point is well taken, Sushant. The problem is, and I'll let Ambassador Triguniat explain. This is the double standards on global fora like the UNHRC. Suddenly, if India were to question Pakistan's record vis-a-vis its minorities, what it's doing in Balochistan, what it's doing, of course, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or even if it were to raise very well documented Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, suddenly that becomes an internal problem of those countries. And, the basic understanding in international diplomacy is you don't interfere in the internal affairs of another country. But somehow those countries, when they raise Kashmir, that's not viewed from the internal affairs of India sort of a prism. That's a basic double standard.
Of course, there are these double standards which are driven by their economic imperatives. I mean, the countries, 57 countries which are there in the OIC, have consistently criticized India, and at one time we had taken decision not to bother about them because that's an irrelevant organization to that extent. But at the same time, this is true, India has always castigated those statements, but I can tell you that every time we spoke to every member of the OIC, they always used to bilaterally tell us that that's just because of Pakistan it goes through, don't worry about it, don't bother about it, we are not concerned. And as Sushant said, obviously, I mean, in the recent past, we have seen a tremendous change. And I remember when we went to Saudi Arabia in 2010 and Riyadh Declaration, for the first time it spoke of fight against terrorism. So there is a sea change in their appreciation, in their approach. They did not discuss in Article 370 or denigrated most of these countries in the Gulf. They understand that Pakistan is in the wrong, and they have been trying to push Pakistan also to do something about it. But that is the policy of Pakistan. As far as Uyghurs are concerned, their relationship with China, and it is part of the larger geopolitics, actually, more than the geo-religious contestation that we are looking at. So I think that this is a major problem that these countries face. They need to put the house in order. As far as international organizations are concerned, India has consistently raised it all the time. It tried to expose and isolate Pakistan as a perpetrator of terror and a country who...
I'll get Aarti on the final word. What does it make you feel, Aarti? Just a few weeks back, I'm told that the Supreme Court was apprised of a petition which some Kashmiri Pandit groups had filed, seeking some kind of direction to the government or some kind of inquiry to find out if indeed there was a genocide, and the court was not prepared to listen to it. Now, for whatever reason best known to the court said approach to the government. The government too we've not had, like let's say South Africa has had, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. As Lalit said a moment ago, the first thing to do is to acknowledge that there was ethnic cleansing, is to acknowledge that there was mass exodus. And unless you have that as a first step, it doesn't matter how far you move the needle. Aarti. All right, we lost that link with Aarti. I'll give the final word to Lalit in a minute, Lalit.
Zakka, one thing, the statistics that have been quoted, that we have been able to contain violence in Kashmir. I think we need to understand Kashmir Jihad over the years has evolved into a hybrid war. We have an internal security grid, no doubt is very, very tight, and to breach is very difficult. But whenever they would do it, they would cause the same harm and to generate the same kind of fear psychosis that they are doing. So individual killings, targeting killings is the same thing as they would achieve by killing 10 people, 20 people in a mass, say 25 years ago. So hybrid war has to be tackled. Don't confuse it that you have achieved a strategic dominance over Kashmiri Jihad. It remains a problem. Even today, bank manager has been shot at. Thank God he survived. Kashmiri Hindus remain on target list. There are thousands. They are Kashmiri Hindus. They are protesting in Jammu. They just want right to life and dignity. Please transfer us. We know that Kashmir Jihad is a problem. It is thriving. It's alive. But the problem is the local Bharatiya Janata Party and the Parivar, they are so obsessed with the elections. I think they're misinforming Narendra Modi, and it goes the very spirit of Narendra Modi's that iconic historical decision of 5th of August 2019. It's a jihad. It will take time to dismember, to dislodge the Islamo-fascist ecosystem that was prevailing in Kashmir for the past 7 years.
I'm out of time. I want to thank Lalit. I want to thank Sushant Sareen, Ambassador Trigoniyat, and of course Aarti Tikku for joining us. We're getting some breaking news here on the Delhi political drama that's been going on between the Aam Aadmi Party and the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. Now, after the LG's letter, the Aam Aadmi Party has responded by saying that Arvind Kejriwal was in Gujarat over the weekend, which is why he was not able to attend this program that the LG had listed over the last couple of days or so. The AAP has also alleged that the LG wrote to Kejriwal on the Prime Minister's instructions. As Kejriwal addressed a massive rally and empty chairs were noticed at PM Modi's rally in Ahmedabad. That's what the Aam Aadmi Party has said. Anshul now joins us with more details. Anshul, what exactly has the AAP said specifically to the allegations from the LG's office?
So yes, the Aam Aadmi Party has come to the fore and responded to these allegations that were put out by the Lieutenant Governor, in which he said that the right protocols were not followed when the CM Arvind Kejriwal was not present at the Samadhi of Lal Bahadur Shastri and Mahatma Gandhi on their birth anniversary. To this, Manish Sisodia has now responded to this letter and has come out and said that since CM Arvind Kejriwal was not present in Delhi, in fact he was in Gujarat addressing a massive rally in a tribal area in Gujarat, he was not able to be present at the venue. And over the past many years, both CM Arvind Kejriwal and Manish Sisodia have been going on Gandhi Jayanti to the Samadhis of Mahatma Gandhi and also at Lal Bahadur Shastri Samadhi. So yes, this political war of words continues, and Manish Sisodia has also put out these allegations that all this is being done on the behest of the Prime Minister, since the Prime Minister was not able to gain the traction amongst the crowds in Gujarat. There were empty chairs in his rally, and that is the reason why the Lieutenant Governor is trying to derail the momentum that the Aam Aadmi Party has got in Gujarat. Okay,
Anshul, we'll leave it at that. We'll see how this story politically plays out. As the Gujarat elections approach, of course, it's going to be political between the AAP and the BJP. Meanwhile, as we wrap up Viewpoint, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is now entering its 8th month. An opera house in Kharkiv, which was recently retaken by the Ukrainian forces, it was badly hit and destroyed by a missile. It's now been converted into a memorial. My colleague Sanjay Suri is the only Indian journalist on the ground in Ukraine right now. This is the report he filed.
This behind us is the opera house that was hit by a missile. And in the middle of all this destruction in Kharkiv, all the bombing, the flowers are blooming. Or should we say they've been made to bloom. They have been looked after. They've been tended to every day clearly. At any time, the sirens may go off, bombs may come down, but gardeners here have been out looking after their plants and their flowers. This here behind is a memorial to those who've died fighting and to those still fighting for Ukraine, fighting bloody battles and very difficult battles. And beneath that memorial, all around it, the sandbags and the flowers between them say just about everything that needs to be said about Kharkiv today. This has become the iconic memorial around Ukraine today. A high pile of sandbags within a black shroud. It is a picture of soldiers fighting and dying. It is the emblem of Ukraine itself. Consider the human or inhuman environment in which these flowers grow. In Kharkiv and all around Ukraine really, it's the season of war, not flowers. The UN has counted 5,996 civilian deaths till September the 25th, with 8,848 injured, but with an indication that the number of dead and injured could be much higher. The worst by far has been in Kharkiv, where these flowers are blooming. Not many people walk by these flowers anymore or stop to look at them. Most people who lived around them have left. No tourist steps by to set eyes on them. But quite obviously, a lot of Kharkiv's gardeners have not left, and they are no more immune to missiles than anyone else.